Castlevania is one of the most influential video game series of all time. What started as a simple platformer turned into a genre-defining juggernaut. You can't walk two steps these days without finding an indie game that is in some way inspired by Castlevania. Despite the influence, the series has never really been able to reinvent itself again like it did with Symphony of the Night. And that's not due to a lack of trying. Just like how Dracula resurrects every 100 years, Castlevania has resurrected into many experimental forms. This time around, Castlevania takes a crack at the fighting game genre in one of its most infamous titles. Welcome to Weird Fighting Games, Episode 15, Castlevania Judgment. Allow me to take you back in time. Imagine yourself in Los Angeles. You're at the 2008 E3 Electronic Gaming Expo. At the convention, you're in awe of what's on display. Fallout 3, God of War 3, Street Fighter 4, Resident Evil 5, Final Fantasy 13, and Wii Music. Despite the presence of all of these exciting titles, your attention is drawn elsewhere, to a dark, almost forgotten corner on the show floor. A man appears from the shadows, wearing a cowboy hat and holding a whip. He hands you a Wii remote with a slight smile and says, "Welcome to the future of Castlevania." And it's a fighting game. For those unfamiliar, the man in question is Koji Igarashi, the then series producer for Castlevania. Castlevania has always been a 2D action series, so the obvious question is, why a fighting game? According to Igarashi, I definitely wanted to make full use of the Wii remote. To do a traditional Castlevania game usually requires, well, a different control scheme. Plus, we wanted to develop a game that could be played in short bursts, something you could sit and play for about an hour at a time and still get a full game experience. He continued, I know when people first heard Castlevania and Wii, they were thinking, yeah, use the Wii remote like a whip. But I soon realized making people do that for long periods of time would be cruel and unusual punishment. A very tiring endeavor indeed. I thought about things a little bit more and came to the conclusion that something like this would be a better fit. And there you have it. For the 22nd anniversary of this legendary gaming franchise, we got a time-spanning fighter that pays homage to all eras of Castlevania with a very, let's say, unique art style. I have a lot to say about this artistic direction, but for now, let's ignore that elephant in the room. These days, I prefer other types of vampires, but I've always been a big fan of Castlevania, and combining it with a fighting game? Sign me up. So let's see what Castlevania Judgment has in store for us. Castlevania Judgment is an arena fighter released for the Nintendo Wii, developed by Eighting. You may be more familiar with their work on Tatsunoko vs. Capcom, or more recently, DNF Duel. For a fighting game, Castlevania Judgment's story is pretty standard. Aeon, a time traveler, draws in 11 fighters from throughout the history of the Castlevania franchise to face trials for unknown reasons. Each fighter has their own mini character arc until they are met by Aeon. After defeating all other fighters, Aeon tells you why you're here. A powerful entity known as the Time Reaper was sent from 10,000 years in the future to the past to kill Dracula and change the course of history. Why did Aeon choose to bring in a random enemy as one of the 11 fighters, or not just bring 11 Belmonts or 11 superpowered Draculas? Only time will tell. As an excuse to get everyone together, the story serves its purpose, plus it's cool to see all of these characters in 3D with voice acting since we're used to getting stuff like this.
Die, monster! You don't belong in this world!
The modes on offer are what you'd expect from a fighting game. You've got Story Mode, which is arcade mode with cutscenes and a random battle with basic enemies. Arcade Mode, which is story mode without cutscenes. Survival, Versus, and Castle Mode. To unlock characters, you have to play story mode. Once you beat story mode with all characters, true story mode will be unlocked, which adds 2 extra fights to the end of each run. This is where you get to face off with the fearsome Time Reaper, and the fight isn't half bad. If you have a copy of Order of Ecclesia, you can connect to Judgment to unlock Shanoa and Aeon early, plus you get some free items. Out of all of the modes available, I was very excited to try Castle mode, but unfortunately it's just really repetitive battles where you fight enemies while trying to do mundane tasks. Not a bad idea on paper, but this mode feels like a weird compromise. Never mind, I take it back. You can unlock hats by playing it. It's the best mode in any fighting game.
Witness the power of the Belmont clan.
Behold my gift, the secret art of Ecclesia.
Oh, so that's how you pronounce it. Now that we know what we're in for, let's see what kind of fighter Judgment is. We can't talk about the gameplay without discussing Castlevania Judgment's 2 distinct control schemes. One using the Wii Remote and Nunchuck combo, and the other using the classic controller or the GameCube controller. I wouldn't be doing this game justice if I didn't try the motion controls. When in Rome, eh? Each character has a set of normal attacks done by swinging the Wii Remote. Special moves are performed by holding the B button and swinging. Items just require an A press to use. You guard by holding the Z button, dodge by swinging the nunchuck, and jump by pressing the C button. I played a good 6 to 7 hours using this control scheme, and I have to say, it's not the worst thing in the world, but that doesn't mean that it's good. The main problem is the lack of connection with the action you do to perform the attack and what your character actually does. For example, to do a standard combo, you waggle the Wii Remote 5 times. Just a simple flick is all you need, but your character on the other hand is doing intricate moves, and that couldn't be more disconnected from the motion you just did. The Wii's motion controls work best when the motion done matches the action in game, like rolling a bowling ball, spinning Mario, or hitting a baseball. And Castlevania Judgment doesn't do this, making the motion controls feel like an afterthought. Plus, it could just be me, but I feel like half the time I would be wiggling this dang controller for dear life and my character would just stop attacking mid-combo. I guess I waggled when I should've wiggled. If you like one-button supers, Judgment is your game, and it shows us why they're a bad idea in general. By pressing down on the D-pad or the super button on the classic controller, your character will perform their ultimate attack. Universally, they do 50% and are quite the spectacle. Although, because you unleash them at the press of a single button and have some invincibility, you can effectively hit your opponent for half health if they dare to do something that has a gap. Not all supers are created equal, as some are quite bad and slow, so good luck landing those. I'm not going to suggest you add a super motion like a traditional fighting game, but having something more involved like swinging both controllers at the same time with the Wii Remote or having a special button combination with the classic controller might have been a better idea. I'll be 100% transparent. I wanted to like the motion controls, but the minute I switched to the classic controller, I could never go back. The game was just much more fun. It was like playing a completely different game. The idea of being able to swing the whip with the Wii Remote isn't executed well, and I can't help but be let down because when motion controls are good, they're good, and that's just not the case with Castlevania Judgment. Now with the controls out of the way, let's talk about gameplay. It's about as standard as you can get with an arena fighter, but it's got some depth. The items are what make Judgment stand out. They bring out that Castlevania element. In classic Castlevania fashion, hearts power your items. They can be found in objects around the battlefield. You can also find additional items or double/triple shots that let you use items multiple times in a row. Depending on your character, the pool of items differs slightly. For example, Simon can use crosses and holy water, but Dracula can't. He gets more dark magic related items. The items can be used in tandem with regular attacks and special attacks to extend your combos for big damage, or you can just use them on their own. If charged, the item will get powered up at the cost of using more hearts. Some items are better than others. Personally, I really like using the holy water, the cross, and the rocks. Combos are really easy to do and satisfying to land. In general, you want to land your launcher combo, jump cancel it, and end with an air combo topped off with an aerial special move. Also, if you throw a couple of items in the mix, you can juggle your opponent for longer. Great for trying to ring out your opponent. One of the more questionable design choices is the lack of a universal grab option. Certain characters have grabs and they work like you'd expect, but I was pretty surprised Judgment lacks one. If you attack while blocking, your character will glow orange and perform a guard break attack. The usefulness of these attacks are on a character by character basis, but you also have the option to guard break your opponent by continuously attacking them until their guard shatters, leaving them wide open for some holy retribution. However, the most important aspect of any arena fighter is the arena itself, and Castlevania Judgment does not disappoint. Each stage has their own unique gimmick that can drastically affect the outcome of the battle. For example, the Cathedral stage has breakable windows that you can fall out of and a statue that fires a giant laser. The collapsing bridge set piece found in most Castlevanias is adapted faithfully in Judgment and is one of the most chaotic stages in the game. Not only are you fighting your opponent, but you're also fighting for space as the bridge continues to collapse behind you. Speaking of faithful, it wouldn't be a Castlevania game without a clock tower stage. The gears move while fighting, plus you can destroy certain platforms, making the stage even smaller. You really need to watch your step on this one. Actually, this stage is very similar to one found in Soul Calibur 3, and I couldn't help but wonder if there was a little inspiration there. The only real criticism I have is there aren't enough stages. At the very least, I think each character should have had their own stage. In terms of being a crossover, Judgment has a good amount of representation from all eras of Castlevania. Simon, Trevor, Sypha, and Grant rep the classic trilogy. Eric and Maria rep the 16-bit era. Cornell represents the 3D Castlevania era. Alucard and Shinoa represent the action RPG titles. Aeon is the obligatory I'm the new character for the fighting game spin-off character. Carmella and Golem are servants of Dracula. Death is a representation of the current state of the series, and the Lord of Darkness himself, Dracula, is, well, Dracula. I think they covered all of their bases well, although the Castlevania fan in me could always use some more Belmonts. Maybe not full characters, but as skins for Trevor and Simon, since they all have similar skill sets. The characters themselves can be fit into broad archetypes. You've got your standard straightforward characters like Simon, Trevor, Alucard, Eric, and Aeon. Simon and Trevor are the Ryu and Ken of this game. Very easy to pick up and understand. Eric wields the Alucard spear, giving him a range advantage, but he can't pogo stick with his spear like he can in Bloodlines, which was a letdown. Alucard is your standard sword character with some magic attacks. I was disappointed because Alucard has a large moveset in Symphony of the Night with all sorts of weapons, magic, and transformations, and to just make him the sword guy with magic is a bit of a waste, but I understand wanting to make him easy to play because he's one of the most popular characters. Ironically enough, if you think about it, Symphony of the Night has button inputs for special moves while Judgment does not, meaning Symphony of the Night is more of a real fighting game than the fighting game. Aeon has a neat gimmick. Depending on the color of his clock, he'll get different special moves, like a giant death laser, for example. He can also stop time. Maria and Sypha are the mages of Judgment, having powerful magic at their disposal at the cost of their normal attacks not being great. Out of the two, I preferred Sypha since her spells were more fun to use. It's a little strange to make Maria a mage since she was never really a magic user, but I guess they needed to fill an archetype. Grant is fast and nimble with a deadly projectile game. Golem is the polar opposite, being this game's bruiser with big attacks and armored moves galore at the cost of being slow as sin. Cornell is your rushdown specialist. He's pure melee and really fast. Shinoa from Order of Ecclesia is a mix of melee and magic, being a bit of a jack-of-all-trades. Due to the sheer variety her moveset has, she can play at any range effectively. Carmilla is a close-range fighter with some ranged options, but to be honest, I didn't really like playing her, and I felt like she just wasn't that great. Lastly, Death and Dracula are super faithful to their roots. Death can attack from any range with his teleport attack and spinning scythe attack. He can also send out those oh so annoying mini scythes to harass you from long range. Dracula is a one-to-one adaptation of his classic moveset, dodging with teleports and attacking with fireballs, dark orbs, and flame pillars. He can't really combo the same way other characters can, but this is offset by him having some of the highest damage in the game. Out of all of the characters, they nailed Dracula's playstyle the best, and I think... Wait, did I just get timed out by Dracula?
Remember your place, boy. You will never surmount me.
Okay, now to address the elephant in the room. Castlevania Judgment's most infamous aspect, and what the game is remembered for, is its radical redesigns. Unlike most Castlevania games, Judgment's character designs were handled by Takeshi Obata, best known for his work on the Death Note series. His work on this game is unlike anything we've seen before or since. For a long time, Castlevania never really had a consistent art style, but once Ayami Kojima came in with her take on the series in Symphony of the Night, that's more or less what most people have come to expect. So you can imagine the shock everyone had when Konami told them that this is Simon Belmont. But are these designs really worthy of the hate? I'm going to go through every character's redesign and give my thoughts, but be sure to leave your own thoughts in the comments as, well, art is subjective, and I'm interested to see where most people will stand on Judgment's redesigns. Let's start simple with Alucard. Often seen as the poster boy right behind the Belmonts, at a first glance you might write this one off. However, if you compare it to his classic design, Judgment's rendition is way too armored up. Alucard is very elegant, regal in a way. I feel like that this element is sorely missing in his redesign, and I'm not a fan of replacing the black and gold with silver and blue. Sypha hasn't appeared much outside of Castlevania 3, and her look in that game is a mage with a blue robe, which leaves a lot of room for interpretation. Judgment certainly interpreted. Just look at those holy high heels. I really don't like the cheesy 3D crucifixes that are everywhere. Without the robe, she looks less like a mage and more like some super church warrior from a JRPG you'd play on the Xbox 360. Out of all the Castlevania characters, Grant has had it the worst. He was a main character in Castlevania 3 and he never came back. But hey, he's in Judgment and it's his time to shine, and he's gone from pirate guy to mummified Valdo ripoff. I guess they figured since Grant can climb on any object, it didn't make sense for him to be a regular guy, so they made him this? Not sure why he's covered head to toe in bandages or why he's got pincushion shoulder pads, but you best believe he's got a belt on to hold up his pants? Hands down, one of the worst redesigns in this game. Rounding out the Castlevania 3 cast, we've got Trevor Belmont. You can certainly tell he likes his leather. Instead of wearing a shirt, he decides to wrap a bunch of belts around his torso and call it a day. With all of those belts, he'd fit right in with Soul Bad Guy. I do like how old and mature he looks, especially with the eye patch. It's quite eye-catching. At the very least, I can say he looks somewhat ready to fight the Lord of Darkness, which is something I can't say about Simon, who looks like a gothic underwear model. This design is the one I've seen get the most flack over the years for how different it is, and, well, yeah. They tried to have some parody with the Belmonts by giving them similar outfits, but it just falls flat. Why would you and your 100-year-old ancestor dress the same? I will be a bit of a hypocrite and praise the big dumb crucifix on the back of both of the Belmonts that glows during their super attack. What can I say, Sypha? The Belmonts just wear it better. You may also notice that Simon's hair is red. This is something they were trying to push for the longest time, but recently most media has reverted Simon to the blonde barbarian look he's most famous for. Unlike most characters in this game, Eric's redesign is very bland compared to his original look. He looks like he's ready to play piano. The Alucard spear looks very biblical, which is kinda cool. I do find it funny that this character has some of the most radical redesigns in the series. Carmela's redesign had to have been one of the more challenging redesigns in Judgment because her previous design was just a floating face. They went with a generic seductress looking design, and it looks like they took a lot of inspiration from Soul Calibur's Ivy, as the two are very similar in design, although I would say Carmela is a little bit more generic, but I feel like they did their best. Cornell is a werewolf, and in Judgment, he's stuck in his werewolf form. So far, this is my favorite one yet, as it's an interesting take on the classic werewolf. Instead of turning into a hairy beast, it's a metallic metamorphosis. My one gripe is the removal of blue from his design despite going by the name Blue Crescent Moon. Maria's design is the one I dislike the most because it completely misses the point of the character. In Castlevania Rondo of Blood, Maria is a 10-year-old girl in a pink dress that is one of the most powerful characters in all of Castlevania history. That's the joke. She's easier to play and more powerful at the cost of playing as a cute girl instead of the manly man Belmont. Judgment redesigns her as a gothic magical girl with quite possibly the largest collar I've ever seen in any video game. And no pants. Shinoa is another design that I really like, and I would say is on par with her original design. Initially, I was disappointed because they got rid of her long flowing hair, which is one of the focal points of her original design. But then I realized they were using the nun habit as a stand-in for her long hair. That's honestly pretty creative. Although, I really would like to see what this design would look like with the long hair. Actually, there really is a lack of long hair in this game, and I'm wondering if it's because the Wii would just have trouble rendering it. Also, I'm only just realizing that every female character in this game is wearing some type of high heel or platform shoe. Take that as you will. Next up is Golem. I have nothing to say about Golem. Death's design is fine, but it's missing something big. When you think the Grim Reaper, what pops into your head? A scythe, skeleton, and a black cloak. Without it, he feels naked and frail. If he had the cloak, this design would be perfect. Who knows, maybe it's in the dry cleaners. Aeon makes his first appearance in this game, and he doesn't look half bad. He's what I'd expect a time traveler in a Castlevania game to look like, and if he were to appear in another game, I don't think he'd look too out of place. Last but not least, once again, is everyone's favorite Romanian, Dracula. Out of all of the characters here, since Dracula has appeared in almost every Castlevania game, he's had the most redesigns, so how does this one chalk up to the rest? Judgment's interpretation of Dracula is an interesting mix of classic elements with a mechanical armor steampunk twist. He's got these vents all over him and his heart is on the outside of his body encased in what looks like a golden shell. It looks like it's some sort of life support system, like it's keeping him alive. Although I could be wrong, but if the design is getting me to theorize like that, then I think it's a good sign they're doing something right. In a vacuum, the Judgment redesigns aren't really that bad. You can tell Takeshi Obata tried his best. There are a few gems in here and most are inoffensive, but let's be real here. You can't tell me that this is Simon Belmont. I'm just not buying it. But again, let me know what you guys think. Did they strike gold here, and are these designs simply just misunderstood? Or do Judgment's redesigns really deserve all the judgment they've gotten? However, I will take Judgment's gothic Hot Topic style over the generic anime trash we saw in Dawn of Sorrow and Portrait of Ruin any day of the week. You can't tell me that Judgment is worse than that. At the very least, I can say Judgment has style, even if they don't always stick the landing. In trying to appeal to a wider audience with a new art style, Judgment just alienated most players because when it comes down to brass tacks, it just doesn't look like Castlevania. I believe that there are 3 things a game needs to be remembered: engaging gameplay, graphics that are anywhere from inoffensive to amazing, and of course, memorable music. Judgment falters a bit on the first, but with the infamy of these designs, the game is certainly remembered. Although I have yet to talk about the music, and for good reason, because it is by far the best part of Judgment. Many tracks are epic reimaginings of classic Castlevania tunes, but turned up to 11. There's just something about this series that brings out the best in composers. Some of my favorite renditions are found in this game, and it would be a crime not to spotlight a few. Here, take a listen. While making this video, I found that most Castlevania soundtracks are on Spotify, and imagine my surprise when I see Red Hair Anime Simon Belmont at the top of the most played. If there's one thing Judgment got objectively right, it's the killer OST. Before wrapping things up here, I want to share another quote I found from Igarashi, this time years later after Castlevania Judgment's development. So, there are games, and then there's succeeding and or not succeeding. Video games are a tough business, and a lot of games don't succeed. The smart man will try to learn from his mistakes. When it comes to Castlevania Judgment, the one thing I learned was from the production side. How to make the best game I possibly can with a variety of different limitations. Budget, time, etc. thrown on you. Obviously, that wasn't the best game ever, but it was the best game that I think anyone could have made within those limitations. And the game did get out the door. He's not wrong. It would be great if every game could get all the development time it needed and every game came out with a ton of love and care, but when it comes down to it, these games are simply products for us to enjoy. Truth be told, when I picked up Judgment, I was expecting the worst. This game has long been reviled in the Castlevania community, but after putting a good amount of time into it, I can safely say the hate is overblown. If you look past the designs, you have a competent arena fighter with just the right amount of jank and seriousness. Judgment is a time capsule of what the game industry was back in the late 2000s. If Igarashi and his team were put in the same situation today, instead of being able to make a new game, we'd probably get Castlevania, the Laminate Collection with Lament of Innocence and Curse of Darkness, remastered with wiggle controls. Or maybe Castlevania would get another crossover with some random indie game that I don't care about and I'm not gonna play just because Castlevania is in it, you know? Games cost way too much money these days to experiment with spin-offs, and that's a real shame. Because without experimentation, we wouldn't have some of the best games ever made. So, I'm glad Castlevania Judgment exists as an outlier in a legendary series. Outlier or not, that doesn't change the fact that Castlevania Judgment is a weird fighting game. Thanks for watching, and bye for now.